Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Psychology of Business podcast. My name is Brandon Griffin, and we have a very exciting episode for you today. Today, we are going to be talking with Alisa Sparks. She is someone who has managed multi-million dollar military budgets. She has worked creating companies in her garage, and she has now been working for her company. She's the founder and CEO of Linden Creek, which is a nationwide interior staging company. And I'd like to thank you for joining the show, Elisa.
Thanks so much for having me, Brandon. I'm excited for our conversation today.
So, for people who aren't familiar with you or your work, could you give us a little bit of background about who you are, what your company does, and what you're really excited about?
Absolutely. So, as you said, my name is Alisa Sparks. I'm the founder and CEO of Linden Creek, which started as a home staging company about 8 years ago. My background has nothing to do with interior design or decorating. It actually is in finance and military finance, nonetheless. And so, I spent nearly a decade managing multi-million dollar budgets for the Navy and for the Marine Corps. But in my free time, I found myself always gravitating towards trying to fulfill some creative itch. So I would buy the ugliest house I could find and spend 2 years fixing it up and turning it into something beautiful. And then once the task was done, it was like, well, who wants a pretty house? Get rid of that. Let me find another ugly project I can start again. And so I was always trying to dabble my fingers into something where I could create and build. And in that journey, I also love to read, and I had recently picked up the book by Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad Poor Dad, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with. But it was one of those that fundamentally changed my thought process around business. I was always taught and told to, have the 9 to 5 to build your career and go up the ladder. And it really reframed the way that people can build wealth and grow within their business. And so I realized I might want to try that really scary concept of entrepreneurship. And so, but I wanted to do it in a safe way. So, what I actually did is I built the idea of Linden Creek. I loved interior design, but I don't have an interior design degree. And so I thought there's no way I can be a designer, but I could stage houses. And so I took the skill set that I had learned over the years and I started building a business. And I would take my Fridays off. I would take PTO on Friday and I'd hire a nanny to come in on Friday. And I would go knock on as many doors as possible and meet as many real estate agents and builders on Fridays as possible until somebody would say yes and give me a job. And I figured this is a good way to like test proof of concept. Is there a market? Can I really do this? And maybe if I'm lucky, in like 12 months, I can quit my full time job and switch over. Little did I know, about 4 months in, it was the opposite. I had to quit my job. I was hiring my first employee, and we were really off to the races. And so that's really what started Linden Creek. We've been on a wild journey since then of growing and delivering luxury services in the home staging and now interior design spaces as well. And we've taken it now to a national brand across franchising. So we've got 20 locations today and are continuing to grow.
Well, that is awesome. Before I dive into Linden Creek, I just want to hear about how you get into military finance. So, were you active duty? Did you work for the military? How did that work? How did you find yourself there? Because that sounds, completely different from what you're doing today. I'm sure there's crossover from the operations and the financial management aspect, but military and interior design, that's completely different.
It is so different. So candidly, my first husband was a Marine. And so we got stationed at Cherry Point, North Carolina, which any of you that are familiar with the Havelock, North Carolina area, there's nothing there in finance. And so when we relocated, the only job opportunity that really existed in the finance world happened to be with the government. So I sort of fell into it for that reason because I had the skill set behind it. And I figured we would be there while he was stationed there. But turns out I ended up there a whole lot longer and really fell in love with so much around the military and the culture and the people and the mission driven focus. And so I spent my time learning about aircraft and budgeting for logistics and engineering and doing all these fascinating things that I never imagined for myself that really helped prepare me for building my own company one day.
Well, good. And something you said is that you always felt like you had this creative itch. Did you not feel like I don't mean necessarily the job itself, but in your personal life, after your 9 to 5, do you feel like that wasn't being fulfilled? Did you not feel like you could, do music or do art or, buy a house? Why did you feel like you had to do something more extreme to kind of scratch that itch?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think what it really came down to is I was okay scratching the itch in the afternoon, and in the evenings and calling that good. But when I thought about building a business, because that became the focus of like, if I were to start my own business, what would that look like? I figured this is the chance to blend the creative with the business side that I'm already loving. And if we put them together, there might be something beautiful out of it. And so it was more so if I'm going to make a career shift to some degree and not manage aircraft anymore, then I might as well bring something beautiful into that.
Well, good. And the reason why I asked that, so I'm a management professor. I teach, and I always tell people do something you love. And I think you can do things you love even if that profession isn't directly something tied to it. So even if you enjoy finance, but you're really someone who's creative, you can work aspects of that into your life, because I think it is scary to start a business. It is scary to do something that's not one of the normal, safe, finance, accounting, marketing, management jobs. So that's the reason why I asked it. And that's really exciting how you wanted the business driven focus of building a business, but also doing something by creating something beautiful.
And I will say very candidly, taking something that was a passion and moving it into your career does shift your relationship with that. And so if you ask me today if I want to go to Home Goods, I'm going to tell you hell no, because I have been there so many times and I'm tired of the dirty looks I get when I'm buying so much stuff. And I used to be in this season where I would decorate my house and redo and remodel my house 17 times over to fulfill that creative itch. Now I get enough of that at my office that my house, I'm like, it's good enough. It's absolutely fine. But I do get to fulfill that creative side and the beautiful side of things in my 9 to 5 instead.
Well, good. And how did it start? You said you were knocking doors, you were trying to find people to let you in. Did you have a specific angle that you were going for? Because it's a whole new world that's not familiar to me. Did you have to differentiate yourself? How did you actually get your first client? And what space did you occupy in the market?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, when I started, I didn't even think about like how do I differentiate myself? How do I create this unique niche? I just was like, I need a customer and somebody that's going to say yes. That was really the objective. And as I thought about it, I figured, I loved thrifting and antiquing, and I was pretty scrappy, and I build my own furniture, and I thought I can do this in a really budget friendly way and give people a great ROI. So I sort of came in thinking we're going to be middle market in our staging services, but I put together gift baskets for every top tier builder or home stager that I had done my research on that felt like they fit that mold. I knew enough about them. I wrote them handwritten personal notes that really was this like nod to here's something special that you're doing in your marketplace. Props to you, dear business owner, that's building your own real estate, empire and doing these creative, beautiful things. And I leave some marketing material with images. I left a special little gift, and then I just hoped that somebody would pick up the phone and call me back. And that's what ended up happening. But what's interesting is when I started that, the first house I landed, ironically, was $1 million property, which in Raleigh at the time was like a big deal. Like that's a high end home. And so I was like, well, shoot, I have to really knock this thing out of the park or I'm in trouble. And so I went above and beyond. I over delivered. We really created this great luxury product. And I just kind of thought, whew, glad that's done. Let's go back to normal houses now. And then the second job I landed accidentally was another $1 million property. And I was like, okay, well, we did it once. Let's do it again. Knocked it out of the park, made this a luxurious home. And this dream agent that I had done research on, but I was like too intimidated to even reach out to her. She happened to walk the property when it was staged because she was looking at it with one of her buyers. She picked up the phone and called me because she saw my business card on the counter and said, I don't know where you've been this whole time, but this is the thing we've been looking for in Raleigh. You do luxury and no one else out here does. And it was this moment for me where I was like ecstatic, but I'm also like, shoot, that was not my business plan. But she's absolutely right. There's this niche and this unmet marketplace right now. And so it was that moment for me where I completely made a pivot and I said, you know what, if I'm going to be something different in the market, then I better be luxury because that's where the need is. And so that really was this a pivotal moment for me that pushed me into the luxury market.
Well, good. And I think that's also a testament to your skill, because it's probably
Thank
a whole
you.
different ball game than, the middle market. And have you found yourself picking up clients in the middle market, or do you still stay in that luxury higher end clientele?
Yeah, we still do land middle market clients because what's interesting is when you put something high end and beautiful in a standard home, it only elevates it, right? So a house that maybe today is worth $700,000 feels like $1 million because of the furnishings that are in there. Where if you put something lesser quality in, it's going to kind of downgrade it a bit. So what's interesting is we have found, yes, we obviously play nicely in the luxury market, but also we play really beautifully in this middle market, and people see the value of elevating their space in that way because home staging, and to play off of your topic on psychology, home staging is purely psychological. Like, if we're going to be real, if you walk into a property that is completely empty, that's that. Like, that's what you're purchasing. But somehow, when I put beautiful furniture in and I tell a story with that furniture about how you would live in this space, you now walk into that home with your family and you go, this is how we're going to cook in the kitchen. This is how our Friday nights are going to end up on the couch. I can't wait to host and have friends come and see and visit. And you build this emotional connection with the home. And next thing you know, you're writing an offer on this property because you had this emotional connection.
And I was gonna ask that. So thanks for leading into that. Is that why people stage? Because I understand you want something to look beautiful. I've heard, take your family pictures off the wall so they can
Yeah.
imagine their family in there.
Yeah.
Why do people, you kind of already answered this, but why is staging so important?
It is purely for the emotional connection. And one thing I always like to tell new clients that are coming to us going, do I stage? Do I not? Is I'll openly say it shouldn't work. Like, it is really ridiculous when you think about it fundamentally that you're going to pay me to hire movers to take a ton of furniture, move it into your house, kick you out of your house. You're not going to live there. It's going to sit there in this pretty space. And then you're going to pay me to come and move it back out. Like, that's silly. But what we see and what statistics show is that your house is going to sell 1 to 5% more, and it's going to have less days on market when you do that because there's this emotion that happens with buyers when they walk into the property. And it's so much so that virtual staging is a big trend that's been happening over the years. So you'll even see it on Zillow now. You can like virtually stage the house and see what it looks like with this furniture. But something really interesting happens when agents do that. They give me the feedback that the home buyers come and they go walk the property and they see the house is actually empty and they become disappointed and actually even more discouraged because now they notice that there are a couple scratches on the walls and there's a ding on the floor and they don't really know exactly how big the bedroom is because the moment you actually put furniture in a home, the room gets bigger. And so they're missing these opportunities and ways to really highlight the assets of the home. And instead, you're like nitpicking every imperfection and you're creating your honey-do list before you ever bought the property.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because when I think of interior design, I think of my wife being like, "Hey, can you move this picture? Can you put up this? Can you hang this up?" So when I think of furniture, I don't necessarily think of something beautiful. I think of a place where I could sit and watch watch TV, sit, play with our kids. But she's someone who's more focused on, the feeling and decorating and making it, kind of that emotional connection you were talking about. When you look at a house and you're trying to decide what to do you have different themes or different uh, that's the only word I can think of, like themes of what you go for? Like something's a little more modern, something's a little more rustic. How do you decide what to put in a house?
Yeah, we do. So, first and foremost, we think let's be neutral. We avoid a lot of color. We avoid anything that design wise is going to be too taste specific because that's going to appeal to the general masses. And of course, there are going to be people that are going to walk into properties that love interior design and they know the latest trends and they're excited about it. But the majority of people don't love design the way I love design, and that's okay. So I need to appeal to the majority. But one of the best exercises that we do every time we walk into a new property before we stage it, we take an assessment of who's living in the neighborhood. Are they empty nesters? Is this first home neighborhood? Is this an established neighborhood where kids are running around and doing all of these things? And then we also take an assessment of what's the architecture of the home. And those two things will then guide our decisions in staging. So if we know that it's a family, more than likely that's going to be moving into the home because it's a 5 bedroom and there are kids running around the neighborhood, we're going to create dedicated zones for the children. So we might put a teepee upstairs in a loft or in a bonus room so that they can imagine that being their playroom. We're also going to think about the materials we use are going to maybe be a little bit more home like and less museum like because people need to think about livability because they're just imagining their kids coming home from soccer with dirty, muddy cleats running all over the house. And so we want them to feel like they can live in a space. And then we think about the architecture of the home. And so we play off of something that might be more traditional, or if the home is more modern, we make sure we really amplify the more modern elements.
So you have built this business and it seems like you're doing successful. You have your market, you have the luxury and the middle market you're going after, but you also have this franchising component. Could you talk with us about that and how that got started?
Yeah, absolutely. So, when I started Linden Creek, about a year into the business, I found myself a single mom. And so my biggest focus, I was new to my Raleigh, North Carolina area. And so the biggest focus was like, I just have to be in the carpool line every day at 2:30, full stop. And that was my driving force. And so every time things started to get busy for me at work, I would hire somebody or I would train somebody to be able to handle the tasks that would take me from 2:30 to 5 p.m. And at the time, I really was like, man, this is a big disadvantage, and I could move so much faster and do so much more if I didn't have this time constraint. But hindsight, looking back at it, I realized that was the best blessing I could have had because it forced me to delegate. It forced me to train and build up a team faster than I probably would have if I could have just worked 80 hours every single week in the field. And so, because of that, about 5 years into the business, I remember it was Memorial Weekend, and I was sitting on my couch and I was reflecting on the week before. And I was like, this is interesting. My team didn't really need me. Like, we're still generating sales. Clients are happy. My team's happy. I did nothing to contribute to any of that. That's very odd. And I looked at my week ahead and I realized that everything was going to operate just fine, whether I showed up to work or not. And it was this moment where I kind of panicked and I went, I accidentally just worked myself out of a job. And that was not the goal. And if you know me, you know that like I am not one that wants to sip margaritas by the pool the rest of my life. Like I love working, it's so fun. And so I had this like almost midlife crisis where I went, who am I and what do I do with all of my free time now? And as I'm panicking on the couch on the holiday weekend, I'm getting these instant message DMs from other stagers, from other designers asking me questions about, hey, saw what you're doing. How are you handling pricing objections? Or how do you store that many mattresses in your warehouse? Or just some of these logistics that are really tied to the business. And I realized we had a really beautiful business. I loved what I did. I had a great team. I was living my best life. Money was good. And I had built these systems and tools that had the opportunity to share with other people. And so then it became a question of how do I do that? And I had a friend of mine that had a franchise in a totally different industry. And he said, what if you franchise this? And my immediate response was like, there's no way. It's a creative industry. Nobody's franchising staging companies. How can I even do this? But I thought, let's explore. And after meeting with a lot of really smart people in the industry, I realized we really did have the systems in place to build this. And so that was what led to franchising, because I knew that this was an opportunity to not just give a bunch of other people my playbook so that they could do it too, but it would allow me to build a community of other people and stagers that had the same drive, that had the same passion, that were excited about doing something big in their communities.
Well, good. And how has it been for the franchisees when they come on and they say, you know what, I'm interested in this business? Are they people who've never done this before? Is it existing people? Who are the people who are taking out a Linden Creek franchise?
Yeah, it's interesting. What we have found is our most successful franchisees are those that come from some sort of business background. They have the corporate setting. They maybe are like rock stars in finance or HR or marketing, whatever it may be. They want to make a shift and they just need to understand this industry. And so we have found it's easier to teach design principles than it is to teach how to run and build a business. And so we really focus on corporate men and women. Typically, it tends to be in their 40s and 50s that want to make a career shift. They want to own something of their own, and they happen to have a love for design.
Well, good. And has that taken up more of your time than, your day-to-day interior design staging business in Raleigh? Has the franchise model taken up more of your time than your day-to-day operations of your business?
Yeah, absolutely, it has. I mean, we really have hit a place where my Raleigh team are run by leaders in my team that are handling the day to day here locally, which is beautiful. But it makes me miss my clients that I've gotten to build such incredible relationships with over the years, and I still get to see them some. But my focus really now is building and supporting our franchisees, which has been a heck of a lot of fun. I will say there is nothing more rewarding than investing into somebody and watching them take this little baby brainchild that you had and turn it into something so beautiful. And watching them grow professionally, watching them grow personally, watching them achieve goals that they told you about a year ago, or 2 years ago, or 3 years ago. And so it has been this really beautiful journey of now we've sort of pivoted into like, we are business coaches, we're trainers and business coaches that just help you be wildly successful at your vision and what you're doing.
Well, good. And when we were emailing back and forth, and you told me about something called Arch. And is
Yeah.
that the back end of what you do? Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So if there's one thing I've learned in business over the years, it's that some of your best business opportunities are to see very real problems that you're facing in your industry and then find a solution for them. And one of my biggest pain points when I was doing Linden Creek and it was just me and Raleigh was we had this great software system for inventory management, but it had some limitations around the way we could really optimize our efficiency with our inventory. And then I had a separate software for our invoicing and our CRM. And then I had a separate Excel spreadsheet for something else, and then three other Excel spreadsheets for something else. And so the administrative time to just keep my business going was insane. And I thought, what if we just like took all these things, put them all together into one, and had like one software solution that was going to be the end all be all that would be our answer? And so I went down a journey of how do you develop software, first of all, and how do you build a team that's trusted and do all of these things. But found those answers, got a great team that was able to develop kind of this dream and concept that I had and bring it to life. And so it's the software solution now that we all use internally at Linden Creek to help manage our day to day and has saved me honestly, like a full time person of just doing administrative work because of the efficiencies and automations that are built into it
Wow. So you're really like also in tech, building
now.
software and doing the thing. And is that what you feel like is one of the key differentiators about your franchise model? Is this available to other companies if they want to do it, or is it only your company who has access to it?
At this point in time, it is a proprietary software. So it's only available to Linden Creek franchisees only, and definitely does help us be more efficient. I think coming from that military finance background, efficiency is like one of my favorite words. And so we always like to look at ways to optimize, save on labor, save time, work smarter, not harder, use our really talented team members in the ways that make the most sense.
Hmm. So you've reached a point where you are successful with your personal business, and you've expanded this to where you can help other people with their own franchises. What lessons do you feel like you have learned? And if you could give yourself advice, back in, was it 2017, 2018 when it
Yeah.
started?
Yep.
So if you give yourself advice back then, what would you tell yourself?
I think the best advice that I would tell myself, and this is honestly for anybody that's going to be starting a business, is you might have this idea of what your business is and who it is, but don't ever be afraid to pause, look above the solution or the problem, and see that maybe it could be something even greater or bigger than you thought. One of the biggest lessons I've learned over these last several years, especially, is I often caught myself thinking too small. I would come in with an idea and a concept of like, we're going to do this in Raleigh and it's going to be really cool. And we did it. But I thought, but I can never go bigger than that. And sometimes it took somebody else feeding into me and saying, why aren't you thinking at this larger scale? And then I go, wait a second, I guess we could think at a larger scale like that. So really, I would say, as you're building and growing your business, or if I could look back and say it to myself, it would be don't be afraid to pause and dream bigger than you were ever thinking before, because the skills and the resources that you needed on day one are oftentimes the same skills and resources you need on day 765. They just maybe are a little bit more fine tuned and refined. And so the sky is really the limit in terms of what you decide to build.
Well, thanks for sharing that. And something I thought was very interesting. You said that when you were creating your business, you had to be done every single day at 2:30 to pick up carpool. How did you manage that when you were starting up this business? And how did you balance all the demands of, being a single mom with having a successful business and trying to grow a successful business?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it was a combination of things. One, definitely building a good team underneath me that I could rely on, because there's only so much I can physically do if I'm in the carpool lane. But the other piece of it is you really need to have a why when you're building a business. There are days that are a grind. There are days where it's like, I just don't want to tackle what is ahead of me. And so for me, it was my why was building a lifestyle that I could be the mother that I wanted to be. But sometimes that meant sitting on my laptop at 11 p.m. and just knocking out final estimates and quotes and doing real life to balance it. It also forced me sometimes to have my kids be a part of the business. So they will tell you there have been countless times where like they've come with me on a Saturday and we're working in the warehouse, unpacking or packing or going to Home Goods for the 8,000th time and shopping and buying things. And we joke about it now as they're not quite as involved in the day to day anymore. And I say, like, how bad of a mom was I for like making you work in the warehouse with me when you were 5 and 6 years old? And they'll tell you, like, mom, we loved it. Like we got to hear the conversations you had with your team. We got to understand just how hard you worked to get here. We have a better understanding and education of business as a whole because we've watched you build and grow it along the way. And so one of the big things that I would say is give yourself grace, because kids are really forgiving and kids are sponges. And so the lessons that I taught my children throughout this journey are far greater than I ever thought possible. And they appreciate them now, because they see what it really takes. They understand what hard work looks like, but they also understand principles around partnerships and profitability and hiring and all of the little decisions that have to happen around building a business.
Well, that is awesome. That's something I think everyone wants to be able to look back and say that they were successful at that. So I don't want to congratulate you because family is very important to
Thank
me.
you.
I don't know if you saw when I muted my mic and I kind of ducked down a little bit. My daughter was knocking and she said, "Dad, look at this." So I completely understand that.
Yeah.
My kids are a little bit younger, so I understand that. And when trying to build something and do something, so I understand. But now
Well,
that you've
and
reached a
props
point,
props to
oh,
you
go ahead.
on that. I was going to say props to you on that. I think them getting to watch you, them getting to be a part of it is going to do wonders for them in the years to come as well.
Well, thank you. And when looking back, do you have any regrets? Not necessarily related to your kids and how you raise them and stuff, because we all have regrets and things we could always do better. But as a business owner, do you have any big things that you wish you would have done differently? Do you have any regrets that you've had to overcome?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we I think we make a lot of mistakes. I mean, we make a lot of mistakes as business owners, especially if you're building something for the first time. And so I can look back and go, hey, we should have adopted this new platform sooner. We should have never purchased these products. We should have, moved into a bigger warehouse sooner. I can look at specific things like that. But one thing that I will say is every poor decision that I made, that didn't turn out the way that I wanted to taught me a really valuable lesson that made me exponentially better and smarter as a business owner. And so I think the biggest piece of it for me is knowing that I'm have made lots of mistakes and I'm going to keep making mistakes. I'm going to keep screwing up in ways that I just don't know any better. I can either take the approach of like, shoot, I really regret that. And that's, going to bite me in the butt. Or I can pause and look at it and go, that taught me these 7 lessons that now I can bring into this next season of my business. And I'd rather learn that lesson at this season of the business because it's less costly than it will be when we're at this season of the business. So as much as I hate to say this out loud, and I might need to knock on some wood, like let me learn all the lessons now before we get to 2, 3, 4 years from now. And those mistakes become much more costly and much more painful.
And where do you see yourself in 5 years from now?
Yeah, we want to become a national brand. So when I started Linden Creek, I openly said before I sold a single franchise, I said I wanted to sell 96 franchise locations across the country in 5 years. And everybody smiled at me politely, but then like behind the scenes, they were like, "This girl's crazy." But we are very much on the path to sell 96 franchise locations within that 5 year window and won't have an issue hitting it. And so for me, really the goal is for Linden Creek to be recognized as a national brand, for each of my franchisees to be happy and loving and to serve their community. But also because as a franchise model, we're very small. We're not going to be a Jimmy John's with 3,000 locations. There are only going to be about 100, maybe 200 of us. I want us to be this community that loves and supports each other, that helps propel the other ones forward, and makes this really big impact in the real estate agents and the builders' lives that we get to be a part of.
Where are you at right now with all of that? What
So
states are
we are,
you in? How many franchisees do you have?
yeah. So we have 20 locations across the US right now. We are as far north as Princeton, New Jersey. We are as far south as Sarasota and Jacksonville, Florida. And then we're as far west as like Fort Worth, Texas and Austin, Texas as well. So we're scattered along that southeast right now. It's nice to have them all in close proximity in this season in our business, but quickly growing and expanding that as well.
Well, good. That's exciting. That makes me want to
Thank you.
explore how to be a better, stage or interior designer for my house. And I'm sure, you're making a big impact in the franchisees' lives, but also the community in which they work and they serve.
Well, thank you. That is, I mean, for us, that's the why in this season of the business is how can we impact and make somebody else's lives better.
So to end, I want to talk about your why. You've talked about it a little bit, but day to day and what you're working on, why do you do what you do?
I love that you asked that question because in the discovery process, when we have somebody that wants to come on board with the brand and become a franchisee, that's one of the first questions we ask is, what is your why? Partly because you need something to hold on to and cling to when the road is going to be rough and you're frustrated and you're discouraged. But also partly because if there is a reason outside of just like, hey, maybe it'll be a nice paycheck, that's not going to really fulfill you. You need something bigger than that. But one thing I've learned while owning Linden Creek is my why has changed over time. In that early season, it really was like I wanted to build something so that I could be the mom that I wanted to be for my girls. And so we could have the lifestyle that we wanted. And I could, show up and volunteer at school if I wanted and have that flexibility. But in this season, we've kind of surpassed all of that. We're in a fine position to be able to do all of those things. And I had to hit this moment where my why needed to shift and change. And one thing that I've learned in franchising is my why has really shifted to my franchisees. Um, it's the message that I get from a franchisee when they land their very first listing with their dream client, and they're near tears and they go, "I never thought this was possible." It's the franchisees that like send me an Instagram or send me a message with a video of them like putting their Linden Creek sign up on their door for the first moment, and they're like getting teary eyed because this is what they dreamed of. And those are the moments that get me up. Those are the moments that also keep me up at 3 a.m. because I just want to serve them in the best way possible. But hands down, that is my why today.
That's beautiful. Thanks for sharing. I have a
Yeah,
couple more
absolutely.
questions related to you. So you talked about how when your kids were younger, you couldn't work 60, 80 hours a week. Do you feel like
Yeah.
you're still doing that, or do you feel like you've had more time to explore trying to achieve balance outside of work?
Yeah, I think it's been very seasonal. So there are definitely seasons of heavy growth where you're like, we're back in the grind. We're doing 60 plus hours a week, and that is what it is. And then there are other seasons where I'm like, I'm not even needed for 40 hours a week. And you get that flexibility and that breathing room. The other thing is, I had kind of alluded to before, I'm not the girl that like drinks margaritas by the pool. I would get way too antsy. I love working and I love business. So as lame as it sounds, in my free time, I am like listening to business podcasts like yours. I am reading every book that I can find that helps me be better. And then it triggers some crazy new idea of something else cool we could do within our own company. I'm geeking out over Excel because I'm still a numbers girl at heart. And so I'm like running projections and scenarios. And so sometimes my hours of work are purely because it's my hobby, not really because the business requires it. But I feel like I've got that balance where I'm doing it because I want to, not because I have to. And that's a really beautiful thing.
I feel very similar to you. I feel like I've always been motivated to do things related to business, things related to my profession. I'll watch a TV show, I'll watch like a medical show. I'm like, medicine sounds kind of cool. Is that, I'm someone who I got accepted into my PhD in law school at the same time. So I'm someone who's can relate to that a lot. And I found for the most part it's been good, but sometimes it's been, I'm an employee, I'm a worker, I'm a whatever I do, what else am I? So I'm glad to hear that you've gotten to the point where you get to rather than you have to or forced to do that.
Yeah, it's a great position to be in. It changes the pressure and gives you almost a clearer mind to like think more strategically. I don't know if you find this, and I'd be curious to hear if you do, but sometimes the danger of like your brain working that way is you think of so many ideas that you're like, I can't actually implement all 17 of them next month, or, like we're all going to fail because, and so it's learning that just because you have a lot of great ideas doesn't mean you can say yes to all of them. And it's picking and choosing and saying more no's than yeses to kind of where you're going to go next so that your guiding light is really there. Do you find that for yourself as well?
Yeah, so I find that in my personal life, but also at work. So as a assistant professor, a lot of what I do is teaching, it's service and research. And then, I also have this podcast that I do. And this is more of a creative outlet for me. This is something where I feel like I can make a bigger impact because a lot of
Yeah.
times when we do research, not people aren't necessarily going to read your papers if they're not used to reading academic stuff. It's can take a long time to happen, but I'll have a lot of research ideas and it's good that I have these ideas, but it's about seeing it all the way through. So I definitely
Yeah.
can relate to that. But then also in my personal life, it's like, yes, I am doing this at work and I took on these administrative responsibilities and I have the podcast and I want to be a better dad. I have this thing I'm doing at church. I have, this. And
Yes.
if everything aligns and works, it's great. But there could also be times when things don't work and, things can get hard. So I
Yeah.
completely relate to what you're talking about.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, if people want to get in touch with you, if whether to do franchising or just to talk about you and your business, how do they do that?
Yeah, absolutely. You can check out our website. It is linden-creek.com, or find me on LinkedIn. I'm very active on there and I love building connections. So send me a message too. I'm happy to chat. But my LinkedIn is Alisa Sparks, LC.
Good. And do you do any coaching or mentoring beyond the franchise?
Wait, I don't do any additional mentoring at this point in time. I've been asked a few times and I always have been saying no because I really want to be able to hyper focus on my franchisees, make them be wildly successful. But maybe in some other season when I get antsy again, I'll start diving into some others.
Well, good. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show, telling us about your exciting journey from military, finance, and through the journey of starting a business as a single mom, and now to the point where you're making nationwide impact. Is there anything you want to end with as the CEO and founder as Linden Creek, but also as Alisa Sparks?
I would say the one last piece I'd want to leave everybody with is the concept that growth is scary. I think oftentimes we feel fear, and so people like push away. You're like, oh, fear equals don't do it. And one of the biggest lessons I've learned is oftentimes if I feel fear, it means I should embrace it because I'm headed to the right journey. And fear equates to growth. And so don't be afraid to make yourself uncomfortable. Don't, when you get those like butterflies of like, oh crap, can I really do this? That's the moment you just lean in harder, because that's where the growth really happens.
That's wonderful. Alisa, I'd like to thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks so much, Brandon. I appreciate it.
And I'd like to thank you for watching another episode of the Psychology of Business podcast. Make sure you check out Linden Creek. Go to linden-creek.com. Check out Alisa Sparks. Add her on LinkedIn. But you have a great day. Happy learning, and I'll see you next time.